It was like a come to Jesus moment. And I had to ask myself some real soul-searching questions. I was in a place where I was just reading books and consuming stuff to try to figure out, like, who am I and what do I want? And I thought that I had made a really good decision for myself, and I didn't anticipate some of the reactions that I got from people. Teaching definitely was a foundational part of who I am today. My students would say quite often, like, you should be a motivational speaker.
Nicole Cramer, welcome. The Sweaty Goals.
Robert Hartline, thank you. Sweaty Goals. We finally did it.
Finally did it.
Here we
This
are.
was so fun. It was so fun. We
fun.
We were jamming in the car.
Yep.
Listened to Phil Collins.
I can feel it coming in the air tonight.
Yes, we did. Yeah. So, what is going on? So we did a cold plunge. We did a workout. We did the biocharger. Now we are sitting to have a podcast about Nicole. What is up with Nicole?
Well, I'm up. You got me up earlier than I would normally wake up. I feel good. Going through all of those different modalities and the workout, like everything in me feels alive.
Good.
Yeah.
I first met you at a Decision Experience event. And as soon as I met you, I was like, okay, that's a woman I'm going to hang out with somehow.
Yeah.
And I've been to several of your talking about what you do, and which was totally intriguing. You gave me the book, Exactly What to Say. And, I come from a sales background. That's kind of the things I like to position myself, and I always have been. What got you into that?
Book itself?
Yeah.
Well, I was in a point in my corporate career that felt pretty unfulfilling. And after some pretty considerable successes that I had, it didn't bring me the feeling that I thought it was going to bring me. So I was sitting on top of the world, according to everybody else. I had done all the things that I said I wanted to accomplish. And I was, quote unquote, living the dream. And I was the only one who didn't feel it. Everybody in my life could see it. And I had accomplished all these things that I said I was going to do. And I thought that they were going to make me feel a certain way. And when they didn't, it was a pretty tough pill to swallow. When the things you think are going to make you happy and make you feel complete and make you feel successful don't make you feel that way. And I really knew that I would not hurt myself, but I was very clear why people kill themselves. And
Is that bad?
It was that bad. Yeah. And I was also stuck in a shame cycle because I couldn't understand why I couldn't just be grateful for all the things that I had. It was an interesting time in my life. It was very dark because according to what you would see on paper, you would have never thought that would be where I was and how I was feeling. And although I had been really successful, I was the number one salesperson in the country, I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't, I literally was like, I don't know what to do. It was like a come to Jesus moment. And I had to ask myself some real soul searching questions. And one of them wasn't necessarily super soul searching, but it was like, okay, what got me out of bed before I was good at this job? Because before I could, being number one in the nation was my goal. That was what I wanted to do. But before I was number one, there was something every day that was getting me out of bed, that was motivating me to go do the job. And there were two answers to that question. And the two answers were, I like building relationships with people and helping them solve their problems. And I thought, well, what if I just make it about that? Like, I don't worry about the goals. I don't worry about the status. I don't worry about the rank. I don't worry about any of that. And not that I'm not proud of that. That was amazing. And I did a lot of things to accomplish that. And building relationships was a big part of it. But I thought, what if that's my focus? And I let the rest take care of itself. So I thought, well, if I want to get better at building relationships and better at communication and better at connecting with people, what should I do? And then I thought, you know what? I'll reread How to Win Friends and Influence People. And after I got done reading that, or listening to it actually on Audible, Audible said, well, if you like that, you might want to try this other little book called Exactly What to Say.
So it was a audible recommend. That's
Yep.
pretty, yeah. Yeah. When I see those recommends now, I do feel like there was
Hmm.
like, okay, I guess I'm supposed to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what's interesting too is Phil, the author of Exactly What to Say. Um, that's a big part of his inspiration, and he has studied and trained with Dale Carnegie's material, and so I'm sure somehow Audible knew that there was a connection there. And, I was, it was like dark night of the soul. I was in a place in my life where I was like, just whatever it is. Okay, I'll read that next. I'll read that next. And the title itself, Exactly What to Say, just sounds really cool. It's like, yeah, I want to know exactly what to say. And it was about 3 weeks into my sobriety journey as well. So I was in a place where I was just reading books and consuming stuff to try to figure out, like, who am I and what do I want and what in my life is going to be what I want and be enough if what I thought was enough wasn't, right? And so when I read that book, I read it in like an hour. The guy's got a British accent, like it was easy to listen to, and I listened to it. It took me about an hour, and then I listened to it again, and then again, and then again. I know now, I didn't know then, it's the number one listened to book on Audible, nonfiction. I think partially because of its brevity, but also because of its value. Like it's an incredible book of tools, right?
Right.
For connection. And a lot of books that year changed my life. That was definitely one of them. And not just because it helped me learn what to say to make more deals. Like, yes, that's a big part of it. That's really cool, right? How are we more influential and persuasive in our lives? And the magic phrases and the tools that are in that book help you do that. But it allowed me to start, I guess, really being more curious with myself and using a lot of that work on myself, which I was in a place in my life where I really did need to start getting curious and getting to know me. When you strip away certain things, especially coping mechanisms like alcohol, there's a new version of you that you have to start to get to know.
Yeah. It takes a while to get to know that new person.
Still working on it.
Yeah. How many years has it been?
I'm on my 8th year. That was 2018. So January 1, 2018 was my first day. And it was really just a year-long goal. That was I set I'm just gonna do it for a year. Because like I said, I was in a really dark place. And at the end of 2017, I knew that if nothing changed, then nothing changes, right? And I thought, I've never really given myself a chance in life to see what it's like without alcohol. And I didn't necessarily want to do that, but I did. I was kind of fed up with the way that I'd been, living my life, and I wanted something to change. And so I said, I'll do it for a year. And then at the end of that year, if I decide to go back to it, I will. And if I decide I don't want to, and I'll just keep going. And I had a friend that had inspired me years before she had done that. She had taken a year off and she went back to drinking, but she learned a lot about herself in that year. And so I thought, that's what I'm going to do. And it was, I just don't know if you can ever properly prepare for something like that. You don't know what you're going to encounter. Emotionally, I would say is one of the biggest challenges. I didn't have trouble with like fiending for a drink or like going to the, like I've got to get to the bar. It was more like I was really grateful I'd given myself permission to not have to go to the bar and do the things and like live in that world. But I didn't know what else to do either. It was a strange place to be.
Yeah. I tell people it's like it's ultimate life hack
Yeah.
of not doing something could be so powerful.
Yeah.
But the not doing something like opens up these other things that you're suddenly faced with dealing with,
Hmm.
things that maybe you don't really necessarily want to deal with and have to face and like be with your emotions and that tool that was so helpful, like that first moment of anxiety or fear creep in and just grab a drink, and it was just like and I saw that with me when I got sober. I switched to weed, and then that's the same thing with a freaking vape pen.
Yeah.
And it's until you finally like, all right, why am I running? What am I running from? And then when you start to face these things, they're actually not as scary as we make them out to be.
Yeah.
Have you noticed like in terms of like the quality of your relationships, did they shift?
Mm, they ended, a lot of them. I mean, I knew that certain ways that I was living my life were coming to an end if I was going to stop drinking. I just didn't know it would be so many people in my life that would also not continue on with me. And I thought that everybody would be happy for me. I thought that I had made a really good decision for myself, and I didn't anticipate some of the reactions that I got from people, and that felt weird. Um, like I remember a good friend of mine, we were hanging out maybe 3 weeks into me not drinking, and I hadn't, like, proclaimed to everyone, like, I didn't go on social media and go, "I'm not drinking." It was more like this was my journey, and I was not drinking, and so when she and I were hanging out, she's like, "Hey, I'm gonna go make a gin and tonic. What do you want?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm good. I'll just have sparkling water." She's like, "I'm making a gin and tonic. What do you want?" And I said, "I'll have sparkling water. I'm good." And she goes, "Are you not drinking?" And I said, "No." She goes, "For dry January?" I said, "Well, for all of 2018." And she goes, "Shut the front door. You're only 3 weeks in. You still have time to quit." And I said, "I don't want to." She goes, "Then what am I supposed to do?" I said, "You're supposed to do whatever you want to do. Go make your gin and tonic." She goes, "And drink by myself." Yeah, if that's what you want to do, I'm still here. We can enjoy our time. And so that really threw me off. And I remember going to my therapist the next week and I said, "Nobody's happy for me." And I was really upset, crying on his couch. And he said, "Are you happy for you?" No, because I wasn't. I couldn't see my way out of a lot of the emotions that were coming up that I didn't know how to deal with. I didn't know how to handle. And the people in my life that I felt closest to, all of a sudden, I didn't feel close to anymore. It felt very isolating. And that's exactly what I did. Everywhere I used to go, I would like wear a hat. I kind of was like in hiding, I just, it was a weird time in my life. And, if you don't replace your addiction with something, something comes in its place. And ironically enough, it was the books that had actually replaced what my therapist said to me. And it was really profound. He said, "Nick, books were never your problem. They were I'm sorry, alcohol was never your problem. It was your solution."
Mm.
And we live in a void universe. And if you don't replace it with something, then something else will naturally fall in. And after like 4 or 5 weeks in a row of sitting on his couch and essentially giving him a book report, because every week I was reading another book and I'm like, "So this week, here's the book I'm reading." And I would, regurgitate it. And finally he said, "Stop with the books." And I was like, "What? What do you mean?" He goes, "Stop with the books." And I was like, "But they're good for me, right?" Like, they were all self-help books. They were all books about, like, how to make myself a better person, right? And he said, "Nick, you're doing with the books what you did with everything else in your life. You're looking for the answer. You're looking outside of you for something that's in you. You've got to promise me you know that it's in you." And I was like, "Oh, okay, the answer's in me." He's like, "No, you've got to promise me." And I was like, "The answer's in me." And he said, "It's like the whack-a-mole of addictions. Take your pick. If it's not alcohol, it's books. If it's not books, it's drugs. If it's not drugs, it's sex. If it's not sex, it's work. It's the whack-a-mole of addictions. You're looking outside of yourself." And in my mind, I was like, "So I can't read my books?" I was still so caught up on that piece. And he said, "If you promise me that you know the answer's in you, go ahead and read your books." But I will never forget that conversation because it made me realize, sure, alcohol was a problem for me, but alcohol was my solution to what I didn't want to deal with. And that's why it had become my problem. And a lot of people couldn't see it, including myself for a long time, because I was very high functioning. I was very successful. I had a lot of things going for me in my life. And so it was easy, I think, to just mask what I was using the alcohol for, because even I didn't even realize it.
Did your friend groups change?
Hmm. Yeah. I isolated that first year. I don't know that I really had many friends. I really didn't know what to do. I mean, my joke at that time was like, what do people do on Friday nights? They go to the fucking library? Like, I don't know. Where do we go? Because I didn't want to go. I didn't have problems going to a bar because I was afraid I would drink. I was afraid I'd be bored. I didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
I didn't,
Yeah,
there
it
was
can be
nothing,
incredibly boring.
it was boring.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to be around people. Again, there was no judgment. It wasn't like I was like, I don't want to be around you if you're drinking. Do you? It just wasn't fun for me anymore to go sit in a bar, especially if I wasn't going to drink. And so I holed up at my house. I would stay home on Friday nights, me and Cassie, my dog. And that was pretty much my whole first year. It was an interesting year. And the book started to create a different momentum in my life that I couldn't have seen or known at that time. But that's when I found Mel Robbins' 5-Second Rule book. A student of mine, his name's Alex Benayan. He wrote a New York Times bestseller called The Third Door. I read both of those within the same month, and they definitely like changed me. They were two of my favorite books that year. And at the very beginning of the year, the book that I read was You're a Badass. And that was really what got me started on the books. And what happened, if we were to go fully back to the point where I told you in November of 2017, that was when I was like, I know why people kill themselves. And that was where I hit like a real low. And I was having lunch with a friend, and I was telling her where I was and how I was feeling about things. And she said, "You're like one of the happiest people I know. It's so hard to see you like this. I wish I could help you." I said, "Yeah, it really sucks." And she said, "You might want to read this book. It's called You're a Badass." I was like, "Danny, I pretty much told you I want to kill myself, and you're going to tell me to read a book?" Okay. Like I was annoyed, not with her, just all right. And I, whatever, didn't think anything of it. The next day, I happened to be walking by the TV, and they were talking about the book on TV. I don't even watch TV. I was just walking by TV, and they were like, "Oh, there's this book, You're a Badass." And I was like, ignored it again. About 2 weeks after that, I'm at lunch with another friend, and the couple at the table next to us is talking about the book, You're a Badass.
It's not accidents.
Not at
These
all.
are not accidents.
Not at all. But I still dismissed it because I was just in a desperate funk of like victimhood, like, all the things, shame, everything. Just somebody come save me. Please just come save me. And then about 2 weeks after that, I was going to Barnes & Noble. This is the very beginning of January. And I was going to Barnes & Noble to get, I don't even know what book, Robert. I have no idea what book I was going to get, because now I know what the universe was actually having me go to Barnes & Noble for, because as soon as I walked in, there's this bright yellow book at the very first table I see, and it says, You're a Badass. And I was like, fine, I'll buy your book. Like, I can't run away from it now. And I picked it up. I read the first paragraph, and I was like hooked. Like just I felt like, in Exactly What to Say world, we have this thing called the show me that you know me button. And that's with any conversation that you're having with somebody. People are always, they want to feel that you can relate to them, that you understand them. In that moment, I felt like with that first paragraph, that author hit the show me that you know me button. I was like, oh my God, that's exactly how I feel. So I bought the book. I took it home, read it in 48 hours. It was literally like I couldn't put it down. And after that one, I was like, okay, what's next? And she wrote another book called You're a Badass at Making Money. And I read that one next. And I manifested the money for my car. I manifested my business coach. Like there were all kinds of things that came out of that one. And I was like, oh my God, what she said works. And that's when I was like really picking up momentum with, okay, the books. The books are my answer. So I had a really interesting year of isolation, reading a lot of books, but it was me starting to recognize who I really wanted to be and what I really wanted to do different than what I'd been doing up to that point.
Well, I have a sensation that what was happening is like reprogramming the way you thought in the world that you're existing. Because when you're a regular drinker, everything's kind of muted on the top and muted on the bottom. So you don't necessarily fully embrace your thing. And I could imagine that some of those books kind of re-inspired you to A, think differently, but B, like start to really consider what you want.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're a badass, like literally woke my badass up. Yeah. That's what I always said. I'm like, it introduced ideas to me that because, years before I stopped drinking, I was like sitting in bars all day, every day, right? Thinking there's got to be more to life. There's got to be different things. Like, but everything revolved around being at the bar. And it wasn't about the bar, it was about the connection, or what I thought was connection. It was about the people that I wanted to see. So it was really about not being alone and being around people. And that's the only reason I was still showing up at bars and drinking, because I felt like it was what you do.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was another way of
You know what
doing
I
life.
love about this story is I've been reading this book, Big Magic, and it's about how
Mhm.
ideas are not really ours, and
Mhm.
we're kind of given these ideas. And it just strikes me that, you know, with these little synchronicity events to have you read the badass,
Mhm.
it's like they're setting you up
Mhm.
for a bigger thing.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, in order for Nicole to achieve this thing that we have prepared for her, we got to have her go through the study. She needs to get sober. She needs some sign to get sober. She needs to learn this skill or learn this new tactic. And then what'll eventually happen is one day you're walking with Cassie and walking through the park, and this idea will come over you,
Mhm.
and you're going to be like, shut the front door.
Yeah.
What am I going to do with this?
Yeah.
But then if you allow these other events, you'll start to notice if you start walking towards that goal, things just line up.
Mhm.
You get a call that you're going to be speaking on a stage, and you have that perfect opportunity to try the idea with a crowd, because
Yeah.
you're great at speaking.
Thank you.
And I know you want to lean more into that. What does it
Mhm.
feel like for you to connect with an audience?
It feels like it's what I've always been meant to do. I feel like, I didn't necessarily want to be a teacher. I was a teacher for 15 years. Something about that fulfilled a part of me that really enjoyed being able to connect with a group of people. And it's interesting because when I was teaching, my students would say quite often, like, you should be a motivational speaker. And at the time, I didn't see anything. I wanted things different for my life, but I felt stuck. So I didn't see that anything different was possible. And I thought it was funny that all these kids thought I should be a motivational speaker and a life coach. That's what they would say. Miss Cramer, you should be a life coach and a motivational speaker. I'm like, me with my life? Really?
But
But
who has given them those ideas? You know, it's like the universe is specifically setting you up.
yep. Because they could see it. They could feel
Yes,
it. You know what I
yes,
mean? Because I was a
yes.
math teacher, but I wasn't a math teacher. Like, I was there to
Yeah.
teach math, but what I would always tell people is, like, I taught life through math. Like, that just happened to be.
There is no other profession that will set you up to talk to a group of people than being a teacher.
Yeah.
There's no other profession at all. I mean,
Yeah.
you're teaching something that it's not like they woke up that morning and excited for math lessons from Miss Kramer. No. So you had to create the energy and excitement to get them to care about
Yeah.
what they have to learn about.
Right. Something that they definitely, of all the subjects,
Yeah.
math might be one of the most challenging ones to get people to care about, because it's hard, right? They don't like it. It's challenging. You've got to really focus. And, I always said it's not hard, it's just new, which I think is a good mantra to think of in life. Like, things aren't hard, they're just new, right?
Mhm.
At one point in time, you didn't know how to tie your shoes and that felt hard. Now you don't even think anything of it when you do it. But yeah, teaching definitely was a foundational part of who I am today in so many ways, that being a big one. And to your point, yeah, they saw something in me that I couldn't have yet seen in myself. And I think that that's a big piece of who we become, is other people that we know, that we're connected to, that care about us, see things in us that maybe we don't yet fully understand. And so I never forgot that. I remember exactly where I was in my classroom when they said it for the first time. They were like, you should be a motivational speaker. And like,
Yeah, that sparks. That's yeah, and you can't shake it.
no,
You can't shake the truth, because that's
correct,
the truth. The truth is that's what you're
correct,
meant to do.
correct.
And
Because
so
I
that,
felt seen. I
yes,
felt seen.
yeah,
I
yeah.
felt seen in a way that I didn't even realize I needed to feel seen. Because it's not like I had not seen motivational speakers throughout my life up to that point. And I can't say that every time that I saw one, it didn't inspire me and make me feel in a little way like, could I do that? How could I do that? But, you dismiss it. You're like, it's not for me. I don't know how to do it. Like, I had all of my limitations that I would fight for. And so I just stayed where I was. And, the way the universe works, it's interesting. It makes things really, really, really progressively uncomfortable
Yeah. If you start
until.
denying your truth,
Mhm,
suffering
mhm,
is in play for you,
mhm.
and it will get ugly.
Yeah.
Your soul will make it ugly.
Oh, yeah.
Everything will be ugly,
Yeah.
So there is a story so this is going to be part 1 of Nicole Cramer, because there is the most incredible universe story that you have in you that I've got to heard about a year ago, that when you hear it, you're like, that is an incredible story, but you're going to have to wait for this story for part 2
To
of
be
Nicole
continued.
Cramer. Thank you for joining Sweaty Goals.